to On Strike, a production of Workers Strike Back. I'm Kshama Sawant. The US healthcare system is a horror story of ravaged lives. Medical debt is the single biggest reason for personal bankruptcy, attributed to more than 65% of all bankruptcies. We just saw Trump, the Republican Party, and the Democratic Party, all of them, completely sell out working and poor people over even the bare minimum of the Affordable Care Act enhanced tax credits. The ACA was never what working people needed. We need a universal free public healthcare system paid for by taxing the rich. But if the ACA enhanced tax credits are not renewed, the average costs of enrolling in the ACA will more than double next year and go up by a whopping 114%. It will also dramatically impact healthcare costs for everyone because of the massive strain it will create on healthcare infrastructure. This is disaster on top of disaster. This assault on working people is being carried out at a time when 2 in 3 Americans want universal publicly provided health care, with 90% support among Democratic Party voters. Support is also historically high among independent and Republican voters. And 3/4 of Americans favor renewing the ACA subsidies. That includes 94% of Democratic voters and about half of Republican voters. And yet, not only are we no closer than we have been to winning universal health care, we have all but lost the ACA enhanced tax credits. This attack on healthcare comes on top of what economist Peter Atwater has called a sea of despair for tens of millions of people barely able to keep a roof over their heads with skyrocketing costs of living. Meanwhile, the richest 10% of Americans added $5 trillion to their wealth in the second quarter of this year alone. There is huge anger at the billionaire and multimillionaire executives and shareholders of health insurance corporations and big pharma who are getting rich from denying coverage to people who desperately need it. Working people are ready to fight back. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to On Strike if you haven't already done so. If you've been watching On Strike, you know that we bring coverage, political analysis, and strategy for the working class of the kind you simply won't find in the mainstream media. Become a member of Workers Strike Back to help ensure we can continue to build our movement against the billionaires and their political servants, and so that On Strike can continue to bring the kind of discussions about strategy needed to fight back and win. We don't run any ads, we don't accept any corporate money, and we rely on donations from working people like you. Go to workersstrikeback.org and click on Become a Member. There is a historic opening to launch a serious fight to win free healthcare for all funded by taxing the rich, to take down the health insurance industry once and for all and begin ripping the profits out of the US healthcare system. But we're not going to win that by following the lead of so-called progressive Democrats. The unwillingness to fight back against the billionaires serving Democratic Party is why progressive Democrats like Bernie Sanders and AOC have failed to bring us any closer to winning universal healthcare. And now we're falling further behind. We need independent militant movements. We need movements like those we built here in Seattle with my social city council office to win historic victories like the Amazon tax and the highest minimum wage in the country. Our movements need leadership that is clear that the Democratic Party is as much a representative of the billionaire class as is the Republican Party. And we need a strategy based on building independent working class power to force change. We need to create a real political threat to Democrats, Republicans, and their system if we want to win anything, not to try and woo and sweet talk them as these progressive Democrats do. That is a complete dead end and the road to betrayal. Trump, who is a billionaire himself and nakedly serves the agenda of the super wealthy, has no intention of making healthcare better for working people either. Despite Trump and many Republicans pledging repeatedly to never cut Medicaid and Medicare, they have done exactly that.
The motion is adopted.
Congressional Democrats have refused to fight Trump and the Republicans' massive cuts. Not one of the Democrats used their elected office to even call for a mass rally opposing the cuts, much less to fight for universal public health care. Instead, they sold out working people yet again in the shutdown fiasco. Meanwhile, Democrats have carried out billions of dollars of budget cuts of their own in states across the country. These cuts will cause untold human suffering and will cost lives. 2 months before Trump and the Republicans passed their spending bill, which includes a provision to defund Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers, Washington State's Democratic Governor Bob Ferguson and the Democratic-dominated state legislature passed a budget that slashes abortion access funding by 55%. In 3 states, Minnesota, California, and Illinois, state Democrats have joined Trump's war on immigrants by eliminating programs that currently provide Medicaid or similar coverage for over 1 million undocumented immigrants. As the head of one healthcare provider said of the cuts in California, people are going to die. Unfortunately, most of the labor and NGO leadership is tied at the hip to the Democratic Party and has been unable and unwilling to fight back either. Working people and rank-and-file union members need to build an independent fight back to win free public health care funded by taxing the rich, and urgently. That's why the members of Workers' Strike Back have democratically voted to launch a free healthcare for all, tax the rich movement nationally, beginning with a ballot initiative campaign in Seattle. This is a ballot initiative for free public health care citywide in Seattle, including full coverage for all forms of health care, including dental, vision, abortion, and gender-affirming care, accessible to everyone regardless of immigration or citizenship status. This would be paid for by a $5 billion expansion of the Amazon tax, a tax on the city's wealthiest businesses that my fellow revolutionary socialists and I won in 2020, a tax that is currently raising hundreds of millions of dollars every year for affordable housing in Seattle. Alongside this, I am running in Washington State's 9th Congressional District as an independent anti-war pro-worker socialist against genocidal billionaire-backed Democrat Adam Smith. I have pledged that if I am elected, I will turn my congressional inauguration into a mass rally of 10,000 people in Washington, D.C. to launch national campaigns to fight to permanently end all U.S. military aid to Israel and win free healthcare for all funded by taxing the rich. My opponent, Adam Smith, is one of the overwhelming majority of Democrats and Republicans in the U.S. Congress, bankrolled by health insurance and big pharma corporations. My campaign is a crucial vehicle for building the fight for free healthcare for all by taxing the rich. The Democratic Party has fought particularly viciously against working-class movements for free universal healthcare. Medicare for All as a demand helped galvanize tens of millions of young people and workers to support Bernie Sanders' presidential campaigns in 2016 and 2020. But in both cases, Sanders completely abandoned his demand and the millions of working people who wanted to fight for it. He did it to protect Biden and the Democratic Party leadership, which ferociously opposes public health care. Some activists have attempted to win single-payer health care at the state level, but the Democratic Party also maneuvered to kill those campaigns. In Vermont, under massive pressure from the working class, Democratic politicians were forced to pass a statewide single-payer healthcare bill in 2011. But the Democrats passed it without any plan to fund the new program, even though it was very clear how it ought to be funded, by taxing the rich. A refusal to tax the rich is a commonly used sleight of hand by Democrats to thwart the progressive causes they claim to support. What occurred in Vermont was directly from this playbook. In 2014, Vermont's Democratic governor, Peter Shumlin, backed by a Democratic majority in the state House of Representatives and Senate, threw up his hands and rescinded the single-payer law. This was done with all the requisite show of lament by the Democrats and "we told you so" pronouncements from liberal media that working people needed to learn the sobering lessons about the extraordinary difficulty of transforming the naive idea of public health care into a reality. At no point did the Democrats or the liberal media or anyone from the progressive establishment so much as verbalize the question of taxing the rich to fund the single-payer program. In the state of California, all the lies that Democrats support single-payer healthcare were completely exposed. The Democratic Party was even more blatant there in sabotaging the effort for single-payer not once, but twice, in 2017 and 2022. The leadership of the California Nurses Association, the National Nurses Organizing Committee, the largest affiliate of the National Nurses United, helped lead campaigns for the California Guaranteed Healthcare for All, or CalCare bill, an extremely popular universal healthcare proposal. Both times, the nurses union leadership introduced the bill jointly with the state Democrats. Both times, the Democratic Party had the governor's mansion and a supermajority or near supermajority in both houses of the state legislature. And both times, a leading Democrat blocked the CalCare bill and refused to bring it to a vote. In 2017, it was Democratic State Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon, and in 2022, it was Assembly Member Ash Kalra, the very sponsor of the bill, who pulled the plug. Gavin Newsom, California's Democratic governor, played an equally rotten role. In 2018, Newsom pledged on the campaign trail to create a single-payer system for California, saying, "I'm tired of politicians saying they support single-payer, but that it's too soon, too expensive, or someone else's problem." As soon as he was elected, he backed away from it. And then, when his fellow state Democrats quietly stamped out the bill in 2022, Newsom remained mum. There are no Republicans to be blamed here. This was a Democratic Party assault from start to finish, full stop. Why have Democrats fought so hard against movements for free public health care? Because the Democratic Party, like the Republican Party, is a capitalist party that represents the interests of the wealthy, not working people. It's a party of the bosses who see any form of public health care as a direct threat to their profits. And they're right. They buy out the politicians in both parties, particularly those in the Democratic Party, whose base strongly supports publicly funded health care. Last year, Blue Cross Blue Shield gave nearly twice as much in campaign contributions to Democrats as Republicans. Democrats are also the favored party of Big Pharma, though both parties rake in millions from the industry. Healthcare industry CEOs overwhelmingly donate to the Democratic Party. The California Democratic Party has received many millions of dollars from health insurance and Big Pharma. When Shumlin scuttled the Vermont bill, he was the chairman of the Democratic Governors Association, whose leading donors included United Healthcare, Blue Cross, AstraZeneca, and the Pharmaceutical Industries Trade Association. The billionaires don't spend their money lightly. They expect a return on their investment when they buy politicians, and they got it. Despite all this, AOC, Bernie Sanders, and now Zohran Mamdani continue to mislead people into the dead end of the Democratic Party. Sanders endorsed Hillary Clinton, then Joe Biden, then Kamala Harris. AOC has done the same. Their Fight the Oligarchy tour has revived the slogan of Medicare for All in name, but their only message is for working people to vote for the Democratic Party in the 2026 midterm elections. In April of this year, progressive establishment Democrat Pramila Jayapal introduced a bill in Congress for Medicare for All. Once again, in totally performative fashion, neither Jayapal, nor AOC, nor Sanders, nor any politician from the progressive establishment even built any public momentum around it, much less brought it to a vote. Throughout history, working and oppressed people have won major breakthroughs by building militant movements independent of the capitalist parties, even in the midst of major attacks from big business and their politicians. Despite that, most of the labor leadership has spent the last 3 decades giving no-strings-attached endorsements and campaign funds to Democrats and sometimes even Republicans. What has that won for working people? Fuck all. Actually, worse than fuck all. It has been part of the decades-long backward slide in living standards for working people and the decimation of the labor movement. Most of the union leadership refused to even endorse Sanders' campaign in 2016 and 2020. In contrast, they unequivocally endorsed out-and-out corporate Democrats like Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris, in most cases without even a vote of union members. In return for these blank check union endorsements, most of these Democrats have stabbed workers in the back again and again. My opponent, Adam Smith, is no exception. Having received well over $500,000 from labor unions since he first went to the US Congress, Smith has sold out workers repeatedly, including more recently by voting to break the railroad workers' strike in 2022. Labor leaders have allowed Democratic politicians to engage in occasional performative gestures while mainly playing the role of enforcers against any substantive progressive gains for working people. We need a reckoning in the labor movement. We need rank-and-file organizing to fight back against the business unionism in the labor leadership and movements based on class struggle instead. We need to throw out the rotten business unionist labor leaders. Working class anger against both the Republicans and the Democrats is at a historic high. All this year, congressional Democrats had been even more unpopular than Trump and fallen to their lowest approval rating in 35 years. A lot of the anger at the insane cost of living crisis has now turned towards Trump, and the Democratic Party seems poised to make gains in the midterm elections. But on the whole, More and more millions of working and young people with every passing year are understanding that neither of these parties gives a crap about us and that they only bring up the economy or healthcare or education or anything that matters to us simply to be able to win elections and with zero intention of doing any of these things. A CNN poll shows that 63% of Americans want a new party and they reject another billionaire-backed party like the new right-wing party proposed by Elon Musk. What Americans want is a new working-class party. Yet, most labor leaders and other leaders on the left are still engaged in keeping the Democratic Party on life support, and a few have shamefully even made overtures towards Trump and the Republicans. Rank-and-file union members need to reject this and fight alongside millions of non-unionized workers to build independent campaigns that can win concrete demands. A fundamental reason the fight for universal healthcare in California has resulted in multiple defeats is because the nurses' union's leadership has failed to take the most crucial step, presenting a credible threat to the Democratic Party politicians that they and the wealthy interests they carry water for will suffer consequences if the healthcare bill is not passed by the state legislature. This would have meant not trying to build an alliance with the Democratic Party only to predictably get betrayed by them. Instead, it would have meant waging an offensive campaign against the rich and the Democratic Party. It would have meant organizing mass protests that demanded the Democratic Party-dominated state legislature pass the bill. It would have meant mass mobilization of working people to public comment in legislature meetings where we didn't ask the politicians to please pass the bill, but rather demanded that they pass it or face the anger of working class people. It would require being prepared to carry out mass strike action to demand universal healthcare once and for all. Mass strike action and revolution itself is where our real power lies. We must reject civility politics, which is wielded as a weapon by the ruling class to prevent working class movements and victories. We are told that by demanding better lives for working and poor people, somehow that is bad behavior. We need to reject the idea that we should be respectable to those who viciously exploit us. That's why when they tell us, oh, I agree with you, we need healthcare, but look, now is not the right time, we don't have the votes, we need to shout them down. We need to politically expose them. We need to call out their lies and say, we demand that you bring the bill to a vote. And those of you who vote no, we will name and shame you as what you are, a pro-billionaire politician, and throw you out of office by running strong independent campaigns against you in your upcoming election. Attached to all this would have to be the crucial tactic of collecting hundreds of thousands of signatures for a California ballot initiative campaign with the clear message that the universal healthcare movement would go directly to the voters if the Democrats refused to pass the bill. All of these tactics, including mass organizing, exposing the politicians, and a ballot initiative thread where we collected tens of thousands of signatures, were crucial in our 15 Now and Amazon tax victories in Seattle.
Council members, I urge you to increase this wage with minimal conditions, because if you don't, we will in November. And at the same time, we'll be voting you out of office.
Hi, my name is Logan Swan. I'm a rank-and-file union iron worker out of Local 86, Seattle. I just want to say congratulations and solidarity to our movement of thousands of workers and youth who made this happen by building our movement to tax Amazon. And many thanks to the Council Office of Kshama Sawant for helping take a leading role in this struggle. Like our successful fight for a $15 minimum wage, our victory today will send a message to workers and youth across the country that we don't have to accept unemployment, unaffordable cities, and poverty, because when we fight, we win. Let's take this big win forward in rejecting austerity through a people's budget, calling to defund SPD, not social programs that working families need, and a warning to the Democratic establishment. We collected 30,000 signatures in a month despite a global pandemic and a scandalous rejection by the state to accept digital signatures from neighbors excited to make big business pay for their affordable housing crisis.
Seattle's mayor at the time, speaking on behalf of the big business and Democratic Party establishment, was forced to publicly acknowledge that the minimum wage legislation was passed under pressure from the credible threat of our 15 Now ballot initiative. Last but not least, winning universal healthcare in California would have required running strong campaigns of independent working class candidates against the Democrats who sold out. This is integral to any serious working class fight back. We should not buy into a false dichotomy of, oh, it's about movements and not elections, and we should not care about electoral politics. In every arena, whether it is the labor movement or social movements like Black Lives Matter or immigrant rights, or it is elected office on the city council or state legislature or the US Congress, we need leaders who have the backbone to not sell out, to not put their cozy careers ahead of the needs of working and poor people they claim to represent. As a California newspaper noted after the 2022 CalCare debacle, even the threat of losing labor endorsements in the upcoming election cycle was not enough to persuade the Assembly's Democratic supermajority to advance the bill. Why isn't it enough? Because we're talking about trillions of dollars in profits for the health insurance industry and big pharma being taken away if we create a real public healthcare system. Yes, it would save millions of lives, but they don't give a fuck about that. To win, we're going to have to build a powerful movement, and we need to start now. Because right now, the Democrats do not feel any threat, and they won't until working people launch independent, serious challenges against them, build mass movements, and pose a threat directly to their political careers. Some say you can't win healthcare in one city, we need a national movement. We do need a national movement, and we do need a national system, but we're not going to get that by sitting around talking about it. We need a breakthrough. Winning free healthcare in a major city or state would be a massive breakthrough that would act as a battering ram in the fight for universal public healthcare nationally. It would be a demonstration to working people of Workers' Strike Back slogan, "When we fight, we can win." And it would decisively break the impasse caused by the failure of progressive Democrats like Bernie Sanders and AOC to put forward a real strategy to win Medicare for all. Canada's public healthcare system, which is called Medicare and covers everyone in Canada, began as a local victory led by militant socialists and workers independent of the pro-capitalist parties. They won it first in Saskatchewan province, which at the time had a population of about 900,000, not much bigger than Seattle today, where we are preparing to launch our ballot initiative movement. That victory emboldened workers in other provinces who fought and won similar victories. Ultimately, the strength of the movement forced a conservative government in Canada to implement Medicare nationally. Similarly, the $15 minimum wage victory won by my Revolutionary Socialist City Council office in Seattle spread nationally to dozens of cities and states from here. Tens of millions of workers have been able to win raises around the country because of the historic movement we led here in Seattle. Winning free healthcare in even one American city will be a massive uphill fight. Big business and the Democratic Party will do everything they can to stop us. After all, the very existence of the trillion-dollar health insurance industry relies on working people not winning victories like these. Big business will spend millions of dollars to try to stop our ballot initiative. Even before that, they will spend from now through next year trying to prevent us from winning our congressional election. We need to build a movement strong enough to withstand these attacks. In 2021, corporate landlords and rich Republicans funded a right-wing recall campaign to remove me from office using racist attacks and voter suppression along the way. Democrats and big business tried their best to stop all of our renters' rights victories, the $15 an hour minimum wage, and the Amazon tax. After they failed to stop them, they filed lawsuits and made repeated attempts on the city council to reverse them. Again and again, their attacks failed, and we won, as Workers' Strike Back has done with the recent Hands Off 15 and Hands Off Renters' Rights campaigns. We adopted a bold and offensive strategy to defend our victories. We held press conferences to expose the rotten agenda of the Democratic Party. We mobilized working people to city council public comment, where we called out the Democratic politicians by name, exposed their lies, and made it clear that it would be political suicide for them to carry out their attacks. In all our fights, we were clear about who our enemies were, and we fought like hell against them. I used my office not to build a career or cozy relations with the Democratic politicians, but instead to mobilize thousands of working people to fight to overcome the Democratic Party's opposition. Importantly, we didn't treat our Seattle fights as local campaigns. They were national and sometimes international. When we fought against the right-wing recall, we raised over $1 million from 12,000 donors from all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. That campaign had 1,500 volunteers who knocked on 120,000 doors. That's more doors than there were voters in that city council district. We involved thousands of working people in our fights. We were serious about working class fundraising. All of my election campaigns and the 15 Now and Tax Amazon campaigns were fueled by working class donors and volunteers who gave everything they could, whether that was hundreds of dollars to loose change in their pockets or hours of volunteering. We organized the strongest grassroots campaigns Seattle has ever seen, and we broke fundraising records in nearly every campaign. We fought to convince every person to get involved in our campaigns, to get every donation, and to win every vote. We need a complete overhaul of the healthcare system. We need free healthcare for all funded by taxing the rich. And we need to go further and get rid of the for-profit pharmaceutical corporations, medical device companies, hospital chains, and other corporations. Without the power to control costs, we would run into the limits of balanced budgets and the cutting of services. We need to take the healthcare system and pharmaceutical system into democratic public ownership of workers, because we cannot control what we don't own. Hospitals, clinics, suppliers, labs, and pharmaceutical and medical device companies need to be run by the working class and run democratically in the interest of patients, healthcare workers, and the society at large. We also need to understand the nature of capitalism itself. The reason private healthcare kills people is because this system is not a rational system based on human need. It's run by the billionaires in the interest of their short-term profits, no matter the cost to the rest of us or the planet. That's why our fight for good healthcare is intimately tied with a struggle against capitalism. So long as capitalism exists, its ruling class will try to undermine or take back everything that we win, which they've done even in the countries that have their own public health care. We need a fundamentally different kind of society, a socialist society run by and for working people, not the billionaires. Become a part of this movement. On Strike is a production of Workers Strike Back, a nationwide organization fighting on working class demands like a $25 an hour minimum wage, union jobs, free healthcare for all, and against discrimination and oppression. Workers Strike Back is also calling for a new party for working people because neither the Republican Party nor the Democratic Party represents us. Find out more at workersstrikeback.org and donate. On Strike is a broadcast entirely for working people and funded entirely by working people. Solidarity.